guys, what is poppin'? Today is going to be a very crazy video because we are going to be taking the Morphe x James Charles palette, finding dupes within this palette for the Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star Mini Controversy Palette. Now, I went to the Morphe store, stood in line for 2 hours yesterday, and I went in line with the hope that I was going to get the Mini Controversy Palette because on initial launch, seeing the pictures online, I definitely found that one a bit more beautiful than the Conspiracy Palette. When I got in, I realized that the Conspiracy Palette, in fact, was very unique and very beautiful in person, and I actually think that it looks a lot better in person than it does online. I found the color story beautiful and unique and different, whereas the Mini Controversy Palette, I felt like I did have all those shades already in my collection, which is why I bring to you this duping video, because I believe that all these shades in the Mini Controversy palette, you can find very similar shades in the James Charles palette. So without further ado, let's get into the video and start comparing them. I don't have the Mini Controversy palette with me, so I won't be able to swatch it side by side and show you exactly, because like I said, I went for the Conspiracy palette instead. And if you are like me and went for the Conspiracy palette but not the Mini Controversy, or you can't afford them and you want to find dupes in your own collection, and if you have this palette, this video is for you. So when I went in person and made the decision of picking up the Conspiracy palette instead, I actually did swatch the Mini Controversy palette on my hand, so I do have a good idea of what the shades look like, and I also have a picture pulled up on my phone right here to compare with. So now we're going to dip into the James Charles palette and find the dupe shades. So I have the Morphe James Charles palette right over here, and the first shade that we are going to be duping is the shade called Flat Earth in the Mini Controversy palette, and I'm going to be duping that with the shade Flashback from the James Charles palette. Now, the shades obviously aren't going to be exact because obviously it's not the same exact palette, but they're going to be very similar. So the color Flat Earth is like a very, I guess, like white shade. It kind of has like a blue tone, kind of the undertone is kind of blue. I also saw that in person, but it is for the most part white. Now, the shade Flashback in the Morphe x James Charles palette does not have a blue undertone, but it is white, and once it's on the eyes, you won't see too much of a difference, if I'm being honest. So I'm going to swatch the shade Flashback. And that's what that looks like. This is the dupe, once again, for Flat Earth in the Mini Controversy palette. The next shade in the palette is the shade Cry on My Couch. It is the second shade in the palette, which the dupe is the first shade in the Morphe x James Charles palette. I believe it is called Canvas. It's like this light cream shade. They're both very similar. I do think they're almost exact, if not exact. Mark my words, if you have both palettes. And that is the shade Canvas, which is also, in my theory, a dupe for the shade Cry on My Couch in the Mini Controversy palette. Next in the Mini Controversy palette, we have the shade My Boyfriend's Purse, which is the third shade, and I'm going to be duping that with the shade Face from the James Charles palette. And that is the shade Face. Once again, it is the dupe, in my opinion, for the shade My Boyfriend's Purse in the Mini Controversy palette. We are now moving on to the third row of the Mini Controversy palette. I mean, not the third row, the second row of the Mini Controversy palette. And we are going to be duping the shade Controversy, which is the name of the palette, or the name that the palette is named behind. I don't know, you get what I mean. And we are going to be duping that with the shade Escape from the Morphe x James Charles palette. This is the one I found looked most similar to Controversy in the Mini Controversy palette. I am so sorry, guys. I meant to swatch the shade Escape, but instead I swatched the shade after that, which was Single, so my apologies. That's why it looks different. But the real dupe that I found was the shade, in fact, Escape, which is the one before the shade I ended up swatching. Sorry, I'm crazy. The next shade that we are going to attempt to dupe is the shade Diet Root Beer, which is the middle shade in the Mini Controversy palette. And the color that looks most similar to that shade is the shade called Code James in the Morphe X James Charles palette. So I'm going to take a swatch of that. This is the one that looks most similar. It's probably not exact once again, but it is pretty similar, I've got to say. Kind of that warm toned transition shade. Yes, that is the warm tone transition shade that you kind of really need as a staple in every palette, which I'm glad they included it in the Mini Controversy palette. You know, the shade Diet Root Beer actually looks a little darker in swatches, so I would say the shade Code James and 10% off mixed together, trying to mix it as much as I can, I feel like this would be the best dupe if you're really trying to get it as similar as possible. Those mixed, I feel like, do a pretty good job of imitating the shade Diet Root Beer from the Mini Controversy palette. The next shade in the Mini Controversy palette is the shade My Apology. It is this very beautiful maroon shimmer shade. And for that one, we are going to be taking the Morphe X James Charles palette in the shade Shook. And this is the one that looks most similar to me to the shade My Apology in the Mini Controversy palette. It's a beautiful metallic shade. Both from both palettes are very stunning, I've got to say. And that is... what shade was this again? That is Shook from the James Charles palette, duping the shade called My Apology in the Mini Controversy palette. Moving on to the last row of the Mini Controversy palette, we are going to be duping the shade Exposed. You guys remember when the Kylie Cosmetics lip kit came out in Exposed? That name is still pretty iconic. So I'm going to be taking that shade and duping it with Pinkity Drinkity from the James Charles palette. They both look very similar. I think Exposed is a bit more lilac tone than Pinkity Drinkity. But like I said, it's not going to be spot on, but it will be pretty similar. So that is Pinkity Drinkity from the Morphe X James Charles palette to dupe the shade Exposed in the Mini Controversy palette. Next we have the shade called Cancelled. Sis, you're cancelled. Actually, no, nobody's cancelled. I literally don't believe that anybody's cancelled. But we're taking the shade Playground. Playground, sorry. Names are hard for me. The James Charles palette have no names written. I've got to say that's kind of pretty annoying, so I have to keep looking back at the plastic. But we're duping the shade Cancelled in the Mini Controversy palette with the shade called Playground from the Morphe X James Charles palette. This one I feel like is pretty spot on and pretty similar. Like I'm 100% sure they're literally the same shade, to be honest. The last shade that we are going to be duping from the Mini Controversy palette is the shade called The Simulation. And we're going in to the Morphe X James Charles palette with the shade Acapella. It's this beautiful blue shimmery shade. Both palettes have stunning blue shimmers. And I'm swatching the Acapella shade as our last shade in our dupes for the Mini Controversy palette. And that is what that shade looks like. There you have it, folks. That is pretty much what the Morphe X James Charles palette dupes for the Mini Controversy palette look like swatched on my arms. I'm gonna insert a picture right up here. What do you guys think? Looks pretty similar, right? Definitely let me know in the comments below what you think of the dupes. Once again, they're not 100% exact dupes. Like I said, they are not the same palette, or they are not meant to be the same exact palette or dupes for each other. So it's not going to be the exact same, but you know, if you don't have the Mini Controversy palette and you did want it and you can't get it, then if you have the Morphe X James Charles palette, I wouldn't really worry too much about it, or I wouldn't feel bad, or I wouldn't worry about not being able to achieve a similar look with similar colors, because you do have very similar shades in the Morphe X James Charles palette, as you can see. Now, I do want to point out this thing that I have nothing against Jeffree and Shane. I'm not trying to say that they tried to copy the Morphe X James Charles palette shades. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, they spent really, you know, a really long time, a hard time, a lot of energy basically, in putting together those shades in the Mini Controversy palette. But you know, all eyeshadows at some point, they all do have dupes in the world. That's just how life works. At this point, I was just able to find all of them in the Morphe x James Charles palette, but obviously the formula in the Mini Controversy palette is different. So if you want to get the Mini Controversy palette for those shades, then, you know, I'm just putting this out for you. It's obviously still your decision at the end of the day. But if you're getting it for formula, then yes, I would still definitely pick up the Mini Controversy palette. But color-wise, if you are not able to get your hands on the Mini Controversy palette, I'm just putting this out there. Like I said, no hate and no shape or form, or I'm not trying to, you know, expose them or say anything. I'm just putting this video out there just for the people that want to get a similar look or have, you know, find similar colors in their collection and happen to have the James Charles palette. And that is it for this video, guys. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and if you happen to have this palette at home, I hope you think it's similar or you don't feel bad if you don't have the Mini Controversy palette. And that is really it for this video. It's very lighthearted, just, you know, putting it out there. There's no tea, no thing in anything. It's just, it's makeup. Like, let's just come here for a good time, have fun with makeup. But that is really it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope this maybe helped you out, and I hope to see you soon in my next video. Also, just putting it out there, if you want to see some looks coming up with this beautiful bad boy over here, which is pretty unique, and I can't find dupes in my collection for, at least most of the shades, then definitely keep an eye out on my channel, because I am coming out with a few more looks, and I do also have a review up already if you guys would like to check that out. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!